So welcome to today's workshop on visa applications moving abroad and more for applicants or offer holders moving to the UK. Um, Very quickly, I will introduce you to your panelists who will then take over and talk to you about the visa application, visa requirements, application timeline, just looking for accommodation in the UK, what's the average cost of living, things that you should be doing before you move, how do you settle in, or things to keep in mind um, while settling in, some general tips on just moving abroad, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. We have with us two really nice panelists who you've met before workshops. We have with us Ankush, who's doing an MSc in Sociology at LSE, and we have with us Vidushi, who's doing a PhD in Geography from University of Edinburgh. Thank you so much, Ankush and Vidushi, for joining us today. And I will hand it over to you, Vidushi.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Misbah. I hope I'm audible to everybody. Yes. So I'll just go through the visa application process. I know, congratulations to all of you who have the offer now. And I know it's a very anxious process. All of us have been through it. So please feel free to raise any doubts you have during Q&A. No doubt is silly enough. We have all been through this process. So I'll just briefly go through what the process is like. So right now, if you have offers with you, what you require is a visa for studying in UK, which is called as the student visa. It's a Tier 4 UKVI UK visa. And in order to apply for UK visa, you need to have confirmation of acceptance for studies, which is called CAS from your university. Now, what is it? What is it? It's a unique 14-digit reference number, which is issued by your university, and this is mandatory when you're applying for UK student visa. It confirms to the UKVI that you have an institute which is sponsoring your study in the UK. So, just to say one thing here, a CAS for a PhD student might look different from what it might look for a master's student. Another thing is, if your university is also providing you financial sponsorship, if they are providing you the scholarship, the CAS number, the letter will have those details as well, that they are they are providing you sponsorship, or they are providing you the scholarship for your studies, for your PhD studies. So in that case, you don't have to bother with another set of letter for your financial sponsorship. But in some cases, that may be a different letter and this may be a different letter. You may have I'll come to it later, but I'm just giving you an idea that you might have a third party which might give you a financial sponsorship, which may be a government scholarship that you're receiving from India, or it might be another scholarship altogether, say in lakhs or something, where the letter will be different for your scholarship, and CAS is a different letter which your university will issue. So this is at least what the CAS letter does, is that it confirms at least that they are sponsoring your study in the UK, this particular university, and this is a mandatory requirement for you to apply for a UK visa. And a CAS is only issued after you have been offered a place on a course and you have accepted it. So mostly when you have an unconditional offer and then you accept that offer, that is when you receive the CAS certificate, the CAS letter, and which you then use to get a visa. um, so you're allowed to apply for UK visa 6 months before your course begins. So if your courses are starting in September, you can start to apply from April onwards. And I think that is why a lot of you have been thinking about applying and have been anxious about it. But you have enough time on your hand to apply. Do not worry. The visa is usually valid for I'll come to that later, but the whole point is that you can start applying from 6 months before your course begins. So calculate the date and period before the 6 months before your course. And if you have the CAS letter, you can start applying for your visa application. Usually the entire process of applying, putting the documents together and hearing back from them might take around a month, or say 4 to 6 weeks. Just keep that in your hand, like the entire applying process, hearing back, getting the documents together. So keeping that in mind, you have enough time on your hand for your visa process. Now, the visa is usually, if you're a master's student or a PhD student, it is valid for the duration of your course plus additional a few more months. So, for example, if you're a master's student, your visa might be valid for the 12-month period of your course and additional 1 to 4 months. So, say maybe 16 months. For PhD, it's similarly 4 years plus 4 months. So that's how long your visa is usually issued for. And you will be applying your visa online through the official website. So please remember, only use the official website for any application. Also, please only use the official website to check for any clarifications that you may need, or your university portals. The university also provides information, university websites. Check the university pages or the official UK government website for any information or queries regarding student visa. Yeah, Ms. Ba, could you go ahead? Yes. Now, what are the visa requirements? So, you have the CAS letter with you. Suppose you've got that. What are the other requirements for making a visa application? So, first of all, foremost, have a valid passport with sufficient validity. So, if you're applying for going to apply for visa, make sure you have a passport. If you don't have a passport, first apply for your passport. It'll take about a month for you to get your passport. And once you have a passport, then begin applying for the visa. Once you have your passport, then you need the CAS confirmation of acceptance for studies issued by your university, which is mandatory. Once you have that, the third most important thing is financial support. That is what I was talking about. I'm sorry I talked about it there as well, but I'll flag it here now in more detail. So, for any course, you need to show that you will be able to financially support yourself both in terms of tuition fees and living expenses for your course. So, if you are a master's student or a PhD student, you have to show this financial support and that you have this amount of money for you to support your course. Now, this can happen in various ways. You may be on a full scholarship, so all you need is that scholarship letter. If you are getting the scholarship from the university itself, your CAS letter will have those details. So you don't need a separate letter for scholarship. In most cases, if it is coming from the university itself. Suppose the scholarship is coming from another agency or a third party source, then you will have a separate letter for it. If it's Indian government some scholarship scheme, you will have a letter for that. If it's some other scheme, you'll basically have separate letters for those scholarships, and those scholarships will be your proof of financial support. Now, suppose you're on a part-time, partial scholarships, your tuition fees is waived off, but you have to show your living expenses. Then you will need that letter, but you will also need to show something in terms of your bank statements. I'll come to that in a bit. So that is if you have the scholarships. Now, suppose you don't have a scholarship and you are self-funding, or your parents are funding your study, especially if it's master's program. Then what you need is either you need to have your own bank account statement, which proves that you can support your tuition fees and living expenses. What that means is you have to show 1,483 pounds if you're living in London. Um, for one per month and maximum for a period of 9 months, which means approximately you will have to show that your bank statement should show that you have 1,483 multiplied 9 times that much amount in your bank to support your tuition and living expenses. But if you're living outside of London, the amount is 1,136 pounds for per month, and you have to show that for 9 months, for up to 9 months. So that's how you will prove your that's how you will give you proof of financial background to support your study. If this bank statement, if you are self funding, your bank statement is enough. Suppose your parents are funding your studies, then a statement from their bank statement alongside a letter from them saying that they are sponsoring your education is important. um, Another important thing, this was a confusion when I was applying, because a lot of times what happens is sometimes your course begins on 1st of September, but your scholarship begins on in October. For some very few scholarships, that is what happens. So there is a 1 month lag. You arrive in UK early, but your scholarship begins 1 month late. So you have a scholarship letter to prove your financial that you have financial support, but for that 1 month you need to prove that you have the living expenses and tuition you have the living expenses to support yourself. So you will have to give a proof of financial support for that 1 month period. Give your bank account statement showing whatever amount is relevant to you, just show that. should reflect in your bank account statement for that 1 month period. So if there are any more confusions, I'm happy to answer in Q&A. But this is how financial proof of financial support looks like in different scenarios. The fourth thing that you will need is to demonstrate English language proficiency. Now, a lot of you might have conditional offer letters or unconditional offer letters. If you have conditional offer letters from university, they might have asked you to prove your English language proficiency, which means that you still are going to give TOEFL or IELTS exams and have those scores and get an unconditional offer letter. So you will need that English language proficiency certificates by your university. If it is required by your university, you will need an English language proficiency certificate. Um, Also, what you would need is you may also be exempted from English language proficiency requirements. You need to inquire that with your university. So please ask your university if you're exempted from it, and they will mention that in your CAS letter also that you are exempted, and then you will not need to provide a language proficiency certificate. Mostly PhD students can do that. Several universities like Edinburgh allows for exemption if you have done your masters from specific universities in India, and they exempt you from having to give any language proficiency certificate. Some Then you also may require an ATA certificate. Now, this is something that university will tell you. What this certificate means is this is a very specific certificate only for very specific projects which are related to weapons projects which are in areas of weapons of mass destruction or something to do with that. They require an ATAS clearance, and only those projects require that clearance. It applies for a very specific set of niche projects. But if your university, and it will be mentioned to you by your university that whether you need an ATAS clearance certificate, and if you do, you apply for it and get the certificate clearance before applying for visa. Then, specifically in case of India, for Indian applicants, once you apply for your visa application, you will need a tuberculosis test result. So you do your visa application, you finish filing in your application, then you have to sign up for a TB test as well. Now, it is mandatory as part of your health screening, and there are certain authorized clinics which are mentioned on the UK visa website. Only get your TB test done from those centers. Different centers charge you differently, so you can choose a center which charges you a lesser amount, but it is only marginal difference. So you can select the specific city and the center, get your TB test scheduled, and go for the TB test screening. The certificate that you will be given, keep it very safely. You will need it for the visa appointment, but you'll most importantly even need it when you're moving and immigrating to UK. So keep it handy in your luggage, in your hand luggage when you are flying to UK. Then you have to pay the visa application fee after you have filled the form. The application fee is £524. Along with that, you will be paying an immigration health surcharge. Uh, this is very important. So, what this health surcharge means is that UK has the public health system where everybody who is entering UK will be part of their national health insurance scheme, which means that you will have free healthcare when you move to UK. But for that, as an immigrant, you have to pay an amount upfront, um, and that amount is £76 per year of study. So for every year of your study, you have to pay 776. Along with that, since I said that the visa is made for the course of study in additional 1 to 4 months period, so you'll have to pay a health surcharge. So, for example, if you are a master student, you will pay health surcharge equal to 12 months plus 4 months. So 776 plus a 4 month period that will be calculated, and you'll have to pay an upfront amount of health surcharge when you're moving to UK. For PhD, it's a bigger amount because you will be here for 3 to 4 years, more than that, and then you have to pay an upfront amount for that. So it's a very big amount. For me, it came around 3,77,000 when I moved in. So it's important to make sure that you have that money. Maybe some of you may need to apply for loan for that, even if you're getting scholarships. So make sure you have that. Also, just to let you know, some universities waive off, reimburse you later for health surcharge and your visa application fee. Most don't. I think this was mentioned in one of the sessions last time that Warwick probably does it. So please, you may get in touch with your university whether they provide such reimbursement for the health surcharge and the application fee. Of course, they don't do it initially. Only after you have moved to UK will they reimburse that amount after you have joined the university. So even if they reimburse, it will only be after you have moved there. So initially you have to pay the amount, but that's only very rarely, very few universities. Next slide, Misbah. Now, the visa application timeline, the timeline that it looks like is that once you receive your CAS and you have all your documents, keep all your transcripts ready, all your academic transcripts with you. So, whatever transcripts you provided to your university for admission, the same transcripts, keep it handy for your visa application and your visa appointment as well. Complete the visa application online through the portal. Then schedule a biometric appointment at a VFS Global Center in India. This center is not in all the cities. There are certain specific cities where the center is there. Choose the city which is nearest to you and choose a date which is suitable to you for your biometric appointment. Now, one thing, when you have paid the visa you have to pay two things: health surcharge and visa application fee. You're not required to pay any other amount apart from that. So sometimes what happens is when you apply for VFS being a private entity, they might say that, oh, we can provide you some special services, some special packages for your visa. Only if you want that special package, you can choose for that. You're not mandated to opt for those special packages. So when I went for my appointment, they asked me to pay an extra amount, but I realized that that's a service I don't require, and you can go in the normal queue for the application process, and the entire process biometric appointment just takes. It took me half an hour to finish the whole biometric appointment. So that is why you don't have to pay any other amount until and unless you need the expedited process. You need some special services. That's totally up to you. Otherwise, you can go through the normal route, and you just need to pay the visa application fee that you pay on the portal, and then the IHS health surcharge. That's it. Um, After that, after attending your appointment, your application will be processed. It takes approximately 3 weeks. They will take your passport and it will be there with them for 3 weeks. And then once approved, you will receive a mail saying that your visa has been you've been given the visa, your vignette has arrived, and you can go either collect your passport directly from the office, the VFS office where your biometric appointment was held, or else you can even request a posting service for which you have to pay extra amount, and then they can post your passport to you along with the visa vignette once it arrives. After arriving in the UK, one important thing is that you have to get a biometric residence permit. This is very important. It is as important as your passport. This proves that you are allowed to reside in UK, and it also gives a measure of how many work hours you are allowed in UK. And you have to get it within 10 days. Now the process looks a little different now because they have shifted from physical residence permits to online e-visas. So it might look a little different, the process. They will give you all the information. They will give you mails. They will keep sending you mails about how you will collect your biometric residence permit. But make sure you collect it within 10 days of your arrival in the UK. Next slide, Misbah. Okay, finding accommodation in UK quickly. So you can choose now. Finding accommodation is not mandatory before you apply for visa. It's not a mandatory requirement, but it is always preferable to have a fixed accommodation. It keeps you hassle free, and it's much easier to go through the visa process if you have an accommodation contract already in place. But it's not mandatory. So you can choose to stay in the university halls of residence, which guarantees you first year residence to the international students. And it's a convenient living option because they take care of your electricity bills, your council tax, everything is covered in it. Sometimes it is also a catered accommodation, bit depending on what you choose. You self cater or you chose a catered accommodation. And then you don't have to take care of anything. You just need to pay that amount for the accommodation. Alternatively, you can choose private student housing options like Unite Students or Student Roost. They offer you different room types. Even university accommodation has different room types, single occupancy or sharing basis, and you can choose which ones you want. There are postgraduates accommodation, then there are undergrad accommodation, and then there are sometimes they have a separate PhD accommodations. Mostly postgraduates live in one accommodation, where our masters and PhD students live together in the same residence hall. Another option which is there, which is from the private market, you can choose like shared flats or studio apartments through Rightmove, Zoopla, or Spare Room. Now, just want to say one thing, that it's a good option. Sometimes you can find cheaper options on this, but the issue here is that you're in India, so it's always good to be able to check the place before you move in, because there are scams happening all the time. So you have to be very sure that it's the right option, it's the right kind of house, you're sharing it with the right people. So, and sometimes ensuring that becomes a bit of a hassle, especially when you have not moved to the city. So if you know somebody in UK and who can do those checks for you, it's great. Or else you can come to UK, stay in an Airbnb or a hotel for a few days, look options through these routes, and then decide on an accommodation. So a university accommodation is a good choice for a first year option, convenient, but you can choose your options based on whatever you prefer. And but it's important you start your search early, because as I said, it is always preferable to have your accommodation ready when you move, because then you're sorted in a lot of ways. You don't have to worry about anything. So you can if you start looking early, you also get cheaper options. As you move closer to the September timelines, the accommodation get costlier. When choosing accommodation, consider factors like how close it is from your campus, what is the safety of the area is like, transport, whether there are transport links, and amenities, whether there are at least grocery stores around, especially cheap superstores like Tesco, Lidl, or Aldi or Asda. So if they are in somewhere in your vicinity, because those would be probably your grocery options most of the times. So just keep these things in mind. Yeah, well, I'll give it over to Ankush to carry on. Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to the average cost of living, it depends on the city. So let's say if you're living in London, then you can be expected to pay anywhere between 700 to 1200 pounds a month. While if you're outside London, your rent typically ranges from 400 to 800 months. But again, even within London, like Vidoshi said, you can find cheaper options if you browse through Spare Rooms, because there are some neighborhoods which are relatively more cheaper. Let's say if you don't live in Zone 1, which is central London, and if you live a bit towards the outskirts in East or West London, then there's a chance that you could find houses for much cheaper. When it comes to food and groceries, students usually spend anywhere between 150 to 250 months, and there's a lot of options. But I think the most popular options are Sainsbury and Little, as Vidushi said. Transportation costs will set you back between 50 to 100 per month, depending on how often you travel. So if you live closer to the campus, that's one place where you save because you can walk. But if you live a little further away and you're trying to save up on the expenses for rent, then you might have to shell out more money when it comes to transportation. Um, so the monthly expenses for utilities on internet are usually around 50 to 100, but for some accommodation, it's included within the rent. So when you're looking for, let's say, a place to live, even if it's, let's say, not a student housing, and if it's a private place, or even if it's a student housing, can please be sure that you ask them if all the utilities and all the expenses are included, because most places might not include it, but it's better to just be upfront about it. So it's better if you ask them explicitly. Ask them if the council tax is included, if the gas, if the electricity, if the heating and water is included. And also, you should try setting apart about £100 per month for miscellaneous expenses like clothing, leisure, and social activities. And most stores and restaurants have student discounts and special offers for students. So you would have to carry a student ID everywhere. There's coffee stores like, let's say, I'm forgetting the name of this one coffee store. They offer an extra discount for students. Then there's a lot of restaurants which have extra discount for students. Yeah. Misbah, could you move on to the next slide? Right. So there's a few things that you need to do before you move. Before you move to the UK, you have to make sure that your accommodation is booked. Now, it can be a student hostel or an Airbnb or hotel, whatsoever, but please ensure that you have a place to move, because Otherwise, it will be very difficult for you to reach there with all of your luggage and then having to look for a place to live because it's going to be pretty um, it's going to be a big issue. You also have to purchase travel insurance, which covers health and baggage for the duration of your journey, which is not compulsory, and but it depends on you. But it's better to just have it on your side. Also, consider consulting with the bank that you already have an account in India and ask them if they provide a Forex or an international travel card because it will take you about a week or two to actually set up a bank account in in the UK when you arrive. So it's better to have a Forex card to keep you going. And some people also carry cash, but I think it's better to not carry too much cash. So perhaps nothing beyond, let's say, 200 or 300 pounds. Right. And organize and carry essential documents. So when you have all of your documents, which includes your offer letter, your passport, your medical records, your previous academic certificates, please carry them in a folder and make sure that they are not in your check-in luggage, but in your carry-on or hand luggage, so that when you're asked for those at the immigration counter when you land in the UK, that you can provide them. It's recommended to join WhatsApp and Facebook groups within your university so that you can start connecting with other students, and it just helps have an idea of a community before you move in. Some universities also offer pickup services, so please check in with the universities. Again, check in with the university so that you can make necessary arrangements because that would be more helpful than having to commute on your own. Next slide. Right. So the moment you get into the UK, it's after you have collected a BRP, it's recommended to register with a local GP or general practitioner so that you can access NHS services. And you will not be charged extra for visits or consultation because you've already paid that as part of your health surcharge, which Vidushi explained a while back. And you need to set up a bank account with banks like HSBC, Barclays, or digital banks like Bonds or Revolut. You can purchase a SIM card from giffgaff, Lebara, Leica Mobile. Lebara has good plans for calling back in India. I think they provide about their 4.99. Oh no, I think it's their 2.5 pound plan, which also has 100 minutes international calling back to India. So if that's something that you would like, you can always consider that. Please consider attending a university's orientation week so that you can learn about all the available support services and you know that you don't have to really throw your hands around. Be proactive and don't hesitate to ask for help. Reach out to your university administration, your faculty, your supervisors, or even your seniors or peers so that you can, get to explore your city, explore a new city and not really feel left out of this. Next slide, please. Right. So it's always recommended to start the application process early because the more you wait, the longer it will take you because then there's a long list of people whose visas are being processed. So it can lead to unnecessary delays. And please double check your documents to avoid, being asked for documents again. Because sometimes what happens is if your documents are incomplete or incorrect, or if the UKVI thinks that there's something that you've forgotten, write the email and ask for additional documents, which then take more time. So it's just going to delay your visa approval. And please be honest in your application and during a visa interview. Not everyone is called for a visa interview, but in case you are called for a visa interview, please make sure that you provide honest answers. And you can reach out to the university's international office. So, for example, the LSE has something called the International Visa Support Office, and I'm sure every other university has them. You have to be in touch with them because even I was getting advice from my student from LSE student visa office about how I should apply and how I should minimize my chances of getting a rejection. So you need to always be pretty straightforward, and it's recommended to attach a letter explaining all the documents that you have provided. So, I mean, that's what I was suggested. That's what I went ahead with because I didn't want to risk a rejection. So I wrote a letter explaining what every piece of document that was there in the folder indicated and what it was there for. So I was trying to be as specific as possible because I was a little paranoid. So that helps. Next slide. Oh, okay. So we are open to questions now in case you have any.